The first cracks appeared on a Tuesday, not in our wedding photo that hung above the fireplace, but in the space between David's words. I'd asked him about the late nights at the office, and his answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. Just the Henderson account, babe. You know how these corporate clients are. I nodded, watching his fingers tap against his coffee mug, a nervous habit he'd developed recently. The same fingers that once traced my cheekbones with such tenderness now seemed to belong to a stranger. We'd been married for 7 years. 7 years of building a life in our Victorian-style home in Cambridge, hosting dinner parties where David charmed our friends with his stories, planning for children we kept delaying because the timing wasn't right. 7 years of me working at the university library, cataloging other people's stories while mine began to fade. I didn't go searching for evidence. That's what women do in movies. Check phone records, hire private investigators, follow their husbands in rental cars. I was too proud for that, or perhaps too afraid of what I'd find. Instead, the evidence found me, scattered like breadcrumbs along the path of our unraveling marriage. Her name was Rebecca. I discovered it when David's phone lit up during dinner. He'd stepped away to use the bathroom, and there it was, a text message preview too intimate to ignore. Missing you already. Last night was perfect. My hand trembled as I set the phone down, exactly as it had been. I finished my salmon, complimented the wine, and smiled when he returned. Some part of me died that night, but I kept it hidden, tucked away behind discussions about replacing the garden fence and whether we should visit his parents for Christmas. The next breadcrumb appeared in our shared credit card statement. A hotel charge in the city, just 15 minutes from our home. Not an expensive place, which somehow made it worse. He hadn't even taken her somewhere special. I traced the date back in my mind. It was the night he'd called to say he was staying at Tom's after drinks, because he'd had one too many. I remembered feeling relieved he wasn't driving. Now I felt like a fool. I became a detective in my own home, noting the subtle shifts in his behavior. The new cologne, the gym membership he suddenly had time for, the way he angled his laptop screen away from me when he worked in the living room. Each discovery was a small death, but I cataloged them meticulously, building a case not for confrontation, but for my own sanity. "You're quiet lately," my sister Emma remarked over lunch one day. "Is everything okay with you and David?" I stirred my tea, watching the liquid swirl into a tiny whirlpool. "We're fine," I lied. "Just busy." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but I wasn't ready to speak the truth aloud. Saying it would make it real, and I was still clinging to the possibility that I was wrong, that I was seeing betrayal where there was only distance. But distance has a way of growing, stretching like shadows at sunset until they consume everything. David came home later each night, his excuses more elaborate, his kisses more perfunctory. I watched him move through our house like a visitor, someone just passing through. And still, I said nothing, until the day I found the earring. Small, silver, with a pearl drop, elegant but understated. It wasn't mine. I discovered it between the passenger seat and center console of his car while looking for a dropped lipstick. Such a small thing to collapse a marriage, this tiny piece of jewelry. I closed my fingers around it, feeling its edges press into my palm. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something unexpected blossom in my chest. Clarity, the kind that comes only when there's nothing left to doubt, when the last illusion has been stripped away. I kept the earring in my pocket for 3 days, rolling it between my fingers when David wasn't looking. Each time I imagined different scenarios of confrontation, screaming matches, tearful confessions, the dramatic exit I'd make after delivering the perfect cutting remark. But that wasn't me. I'd never been one for scenes. The weekend arrived with rain pelting against our windows, trapping us both indoors with nowhere to escape. David sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone while I prepared a pot of coffee neither of us really wanted. The domesticity of it all suddenly felt like a cruel joke. "I was thinking we could try that new Italian place tonight," he said without looking up. "Tom and Jessica said the pasta is incredible." Tom, the friend he'd supposedly stayed with. Another lie in a house now built of them. "I found something," I said quietly, placing the earring on the counter between us. It made a small clicking sound against the marble, like a period punctuating the end of a sentence. David stared at it, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition, to something like fear. The transformation would have been fascinating if it hadn't been devastating. "That's not what you think," he began. But the words died as soon as they left his mouth. Even he didn't believe them. "I don't actually care what it is," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I care that it's in our car. I care that you've been lying to me for months. I care that you thought I was too stupid to notice. Caroline, please." "Is it Rebecca?" The name felt strange on my tongue, like speaking a language I'd only read in books. "The one who texted you about your perfect night last month." His eyes widened. I'd never seen him look so small, sitting there in his weekend sweater, his coffee going cold. For a moment, I felt a perverse satisfaction. I wasn't the only one who'd been blindsided. "It wasn't supposed to be anything serious," he said finally, as if that were some kind of defense. "It just happened. And then it kept happening. And I didn't know how to stop it." "You could have tried not sleeping with her," I suggested, my voice dripping with a sarcasm I didn't recognize. That might have been a start. Rain continued to drum against the windows as David launched into the explanation I hadn't asked for. How they'd met at a conference. How she understood the pressures of his job. How he'd never meant to hurt me. I listened with a strange detachment, as if he were describing someone else's marriage falling apart. When he finished, the silence stretched between us, heavy with all the years we'd shared, and all the future we'd lost. "Are you in love with her?" I asked, not sure why it mattered, but needing to know anyway. David hesitated, which was answer enough. "I don't know what I feel anymore," he admitted. "Everything's confused." I nodded, gathering my mug and his, emptying both into the sink. Such a mundane action in the middle of catastrophe. "I'm going to my sister's," I said. "I'll be back tomorrow to get some things. You should decide what you want by then." "What about what you want?" he asked, his voice small. I paused at the doorway, considering. What did I want? The marriage I thought we had. That was gone. The man I thought I married? He never existed. "I want to not feel like this anymore," I answered honestly. "Everything else is negotiable." The drive to Emma's house was a blur. I remember the windshield wipers keeping time with my heartbeat, the radio playing songs from someone else's life. I didn't call ahead. I couldn't bear to say the words out loud yet. When she opened the door, one look at my face told her everything. "Oh, honey," she whispered, pulling me into her arms. And there, in my sister's embrace, I finally allowed myself to break. The sobs came from somewhere deep and primal. Years of suspicion and months of certainty collapsing into this moment of absolute vulnerability. Emma didn't ask questions. She made tea, found me pajamas, and sat with me on her couch as rain continued to fall outside. "Whatever you need," she said simply, "for as long as you need it." That night, I slept in her guest room, surrounded by photographs of her happy family. Her husband Mark brought me extra blankets without being asked. Their kindness was its own kind of heartbreak, a reminder of what a marriage could be, should be. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, I realized that tomorrow would be the first day of whatever came next. The thought was equal parts terrifying and liberating. Morning arrived with uncomfortable clarity. Emma's guest room faced east, and sunlight streamed through thin curtains, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. I watched them for a while, these tiny specks suspended, neither rising nor falling, just existing in the light. I envied their simplicity. My phone had been silent. No calls from David, no desperate texts. His absence spoke volumes. Either he was respecting my space, or he'd already made his choice. I suspected the latter. There's a particular grief in realizing you aren't worth fighting for. A unique humiliation in being so easily surrendered. "I made pancakes," Emma called from the kitchen. "Blueberry, and coffee's ready." The normalcy was jarring. Pancakes, coffee, Saturday morning, as if the foundation of my life hadn't crumbled less than 24 hours ago. I pulled myself from bed, catching my reflection in the mirror above Emma's antique dresser. I looked the same. Somehow that felt like a betrayal, too. Shouldn't catastrophe leave visible marks? "I need to go back today," I announced, as Emma placed a stack of pancakes in front of me. "Get some clothes, my laptop, figure out next steps." She paused. coffee pot in hand. Want me to come with you? No. The answer came quickly. This is something I need to do alone. The drive back to what I still thought of as home was surreal. Cambridge looked the same. Students wandering through Harvard Square. Couples holding hands outside cafes. Life continuing without interruption. I parked in our driveway, noting David's car was gone. Relief and disappointment tangled in my chest. Inside, the house felt different. Colder. As if it knew its status had changed from home to house. From future to past. I moved through the rooms with purpose, filling a suitcase with clothes, gathering essential documents, taking only what I needed to exist elsewhere. In the bathroom, I stared at our twin toothbrushes in their holder. Such an intimate thing. These tools of daily life. I left mine behind. I was in our bedroom, folding sweaters into a duffel bag, when I heard the front door open. My body tensed, preparing for the confrontation I'd been rehearsing in my mind. "Caroline?" David's voice echoed from downstairs. "Your car's outside. Can we talk?" I didn't answer, but continued packing. His footsteps on the stairs matched my heartbeat, growing louder until he appeared in the doorway. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing yesterday's clothes. Some vindictive part of me was glad. "You're really leaving," he said. Not a question. "Did you think I'd stay?" I zipped the duffel closed with more force than necessary. "Did you think we'd have a good cry? And then I'd make dinner while you texted her under the table?" He flinched. "I ended it with Rebecca. Last night after you left. The revelation should have meant something. Weeks ago. Days ago, it might have. Now it just felt like closing the gate after the horse had bolted. Congratulations on doing the bare minimum," I said, moving past him toward the door. "But it's too late. I made a mistake, Caroline. A terrible mistake." His voice cracked. "But 7 years. Doesn't that count for something? Don't we at least try to fix this?" I paused at the top of the stairs, turning to face him. What exactly would we be fixing, David? The lying? The cheating? Or the fact that you're only sorry because you got caught? That's not fair. None of this is fair, I countered. But it's real. And the reality is, I don't know who you are anymore. I'm not sure I ever did. He followed me downstairs, his voice growing desperate. People make mistakes. Marriages survive this kind of thing all the time. Maybe they do, I conceded, placing my bags by the front door. But I'm not interested in survival. I want more than that. Standing in the entryway of the house we'd chosen together, I suddenly remembered our first night here, how we'd sat on the empty living room floor eating takeout, planning where furniture would go, imagining the life we'd build. The memory ached like pressing on a bruise. "I'm staying at Emma's for now," I said, softer than before. "I need time to think, space to breathe. Please don't call me. I'll reach out when I'm ready." "And if you're never ready?" There was real fear in his eyes now. I picked up my bags, suddenly exhausted by the weight of it all. "Then that's your answer." Outside, the spring air felt different, sharper, more vibrant. I placed my things in the trunk, aware of David watching from the doorway. I didn't look back as I drove away. The wedding ring on my finger caught the sunlight, sending prisms dancing across the dashboard. Such a small circle to contain so much promise, so much disappointment. At the first stoplight, I slipped it off and placed it in the console. Not a final decision, just a moment of honesty. A recognition that some circles, once broken, can never be perfect again. Emma's guest room became my sanctuary. Days turned into weeks, and I developed a routine of sorts, waking before her children, helping with breakfast, then retreating to work remotely from the small desk she'd squeezed into the corner. My sister never pressured me to talk, but she was always there when I needed her, a silent presence offering tea and patience in equal measure. "I found a therapist," I told her one evening as we sat on her back porch, watching fireflies emerge in the twilight. "Her name is Dr. Rosenberg. First appointment is next Tuesday." Emma smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "I'm proud of you, Caro." The simple praise nearly undid me. I'd been so focused on not falling apart that I hadn't recognized the strength in staying together. "I keep thinking I should have known," I confessed, the words tumbling out after weeks of containment. "There must have been signs before the obvious ones." Maybe there were, maybe there weren't. Emma shrugged. Either way, his choices aren't your responsibility. The statement was so straightforward, so clear, that it struck me with the force of revelation. His choices weren't my responsibility. I'd been carrying that weight without realizing it, the belief that I could have prevented this somehow, that I should have been better, more attentive, more something. David had called 3 times since I'd left. I'd let each go to voicemail, listening to his messages later when I felt strong enough. The first was apologetic, the second angry, the third resigned. I responded to none of them, but saved them all. Evidence, perhaps, though of what I wasn't sure. My lawyer, another strange new reality, having my lawyer, advised minimal contact. Everything in writing, preferably email, she said during our first consultation. And remember, anything you say could be used in settlement negotiations. Settlement. Another cold word for the dismantling of a life. I nodded as if I understood, as if I weren't silently calculating the cost of 7 years reduced to assets and liabilities. Work became my anchor. The university library, with its timeless rhythms and orderly systems, offered refuge from the chaos of my personal life. I threw myself into a digitization project I'd been putting off, scanning fragile manuscripts from the 18th century, cataloging pieces of other people's histories while my own hung in suspension. "You don't have to be here, you know," my supervisor Martha said one evening, finding me still at my desk long after closing. "We can extend the project deadline." "I want to be here," I replied, not looking up from the document scanner. "It helps." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Martha had been divorced twice. She'd brought me coffee the day after I changed my emergency contact information in the HR system. No questions, just caffeine and quiet solidarity. The first time I cried in Dr. Rosenberg's office, it wasn't about David's betrayal. It was about a memory that surfaced unexpectedly. Our third date, when he'd driven 40 minutes to bring me soup when I had the flu. "He was so kind," I sobbed. "How do I reconcile that man with the one who could lie to my face for months?" "Perhaps both versions are true," she suggested, offering a tissue. "People are complex. Recognizing that doesn't excuse his actions, but it might help you process them." Nights were the hardest. In darkness, doubt crept in. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe marriages did survive these things. Maybe loneliness was worse than betrayal. I'd scroll through our old photos, searching for clues in our smiling faces. Had we been happy? Really happy? Or had we just been going through the motions of happiness, following the script we thought we were supposed to? Emma's youngest, 5-year-old Lily, started climbing into my bed some mornings. She'd bring her stuffed rabbit and curl against me, warm and trusting. "Aunt Caroline sad?" she asked once, her small hand patting my cheek with surprising gentleness. "A little," I admitted. She nodded solemnly. "When I sad, Bunny helps." She pressed her rabbit into my arms with the gravity of a sacred offering. I held the worn toy against my chest, overwhelmed by the simple kindness. "Thank you, Lily. Welcome," she replied, settling back against the pillows. "Now we wait. Sad goes away slow. From the mouth of babes," I thought, holding my niece close. "Sad goes away slow." The most honest prognosis I'd heard yet. The bookstore on Brattle Street had always been my refuge. Even before the separation, I'd escape there on Sunday afternoons, losing myself among shelves of poetry and literary fiction. The familiar scent of paper and coffee welcomed me as I pushed through the door, nodding to the gray-haired woman who'd been working the register since I was in graduate school. I was browsing the new releases when I heard his laugh. David's laugh. Unmistakable. Slightly too loud with that peculiar catch at the end. My body recognized it before my mind did, tensing as if preparing for impact. I glanced up, and there they were, just 2 aisles over. David hadn't seen me yet. He was focused on the woman beside him, petite, with sleek dark hair and delicate features. She was pretty in an effortless way, the type of woman who probably didn't need much makeup, who probably woke up looking polished. Rebecca. It had to be. She was pointing to a book, saying something I couldn't hear, and David was laughing as if it were the cleverest thing anyone had ever said. I could have left. Should have left. Instead, I stood frozen, cataloging details with the precision of my professional training. The way his hand rested at the small of her back, the matching coffees they'd set on a nearby shelf, the ease between them that spoke of intimacy beyond the physical. Then David turned, and our eyes met across the stacks of carefully curated literature. His smile vanished. I watched recognition, then shock, then guilt wash over his face in rapid succession. He said something to Rebecca, who followed his gaze to me. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding. She knew who I was. Time stretched like taffy in that moment. Part of me wanted to flee. Another part wanted to scream. But instead, I found myself walking toward them with a calmness I didn't feel. Some bizarre social autopilot had taken control, propelling me forward when every instinct screamed retreat. "Hello, David," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Then to the woman who had featured in my nightmares for weeks. "You must be Rebecca." She had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I am. And you're Caroline." "Yes." The absurdity of the situation hit me. Here we were, 3 adults making polite introductions, as if at a dinner party, not in the middle of a human disaster. "I've heard nothing about you." David winced. "Caroline." "Don't," I cut him off. "We're not doing this here." Rebecca shifted her weight, clutching her book like a shield. "Maybe I should go." "You don't have to," I said, surprising myself again. I was just leaving. But as I turned to go, Rebecca called after me. "Wait." She took a step forward, maintaining a careful distance. "I know this doesn't help, but I'm sorry. Truly." I studied her face, searching for insincerity, for triumph, for any sign that would make it easier to hate her. I found only discomfort, and what seemed like genuine regret. "Are you?" "Yes," she said simply. You never meant for me to find out." I finished for her. "No one ever does." David moved between us, his face pale. "This isn't the place, Caroline. Please." The please undid me. The audacity of him asking anything of me. Here now. "When would be convenient for you, David? Should I schedule my pain around your new relationship?" A few other patrons glanced our way, quickly averting their eyes from the unfolding drama. The bookstore suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. "I should leave you two to talk," Rebecca murmured, already backing away. She placed her book on a nearby table, a collection of Mary Oliver poems. Of course she would like Mary Oliver. Of course. When she was gone, David let out a long breath. "I didn't know you still came here. There are a lot of things you don't know about me anymore," I replied. The anger had drained away, leaving only exhaustion in its wake, including that I won't make a scene in my favorite bookstore. "She insisted we talk to you," he said quietly. "When she saw you, she said we owed you that much." I laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. How considerate of her. Is that supposed to make me feel better about the woman sleeping with my husband? Ex-husband. Soon, anyway. He looked down at his hands, at the pale band where his wedding ring had been. "The papers are ready. My lawyer will send them this week." The blow landed harder than I expected. Even though I'd known it was coming, even though I'd initiated it, the finality of those words, papers, lawyer, made it suddenly, terribly real. "Good," I managed. "That's good." We stood in silence among the books, 2 people who had once shared everything, now struggling to find words for each other. Outside the window, Cambridge continued its Sunday afternoon. Students laughing, couples strolling, life moving forward while mine seemed suspended in amber. "Are you happy?" The question escaped before I could stop it. With her, I mean. David looked startled, then thoughtful. "I don't know if happy is the right word," he admitted. "It's complicated. It always is." I picked up a book without seeing its title, needing something to do with my hands. "Goodbye, David." As I walked toward the register, book clutched to my chest, I felt his eyes on my back but didn't turn around. The gray-haired cashier rang up my purchase. A cookbook, I realized with mild surprise. I never cooked anymore. "You okay, dear?" she asked, peering at me over her glasses. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled weakly. Something like that. Outside, I leaned against the brick wall, breathing in the autumn air. I hadn't fallen apart. I'd faced them both and walked away intact. It was a small victory, but in those days, I counted even the smallest wins. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted Victorian in Somerville. Smaller than I was used to, with creaking floors and radiators that clanged in the night, but it had tall windows that filled the space with light, and built-in bookshelves that seemed designed for my collection. The landlady, Mrs. Patel, lived on the 1st floor, and had accepted me despite my newly uncertain financial situation. "Everyone deserves a fresh start," she'd said when I explained my circumstances. "Besides, anyone who works with books can't be all bad." Moving day came in October, leaves turning gold and red as Emma and Mark helped me carry boxes up the narrow stairs. My belongings looked different here. The furniture David and I had chosen together seemed like artifacts from another life, slightly out of place against these unfamiliar walls. "We could get you new stuff," Emma suggested, watching me arrange and rearrange a bookshelf that refused to look right. "Fresh start, fresh decor." I shook my head. "Not yet. One change at a time." The divorce papers arrived the day after I moved in. I signed them at my new kitchen table, a bottle of wine open beside me, no glass needed. My lawyer had negotiated well. The house would be sold, the proceeds split, my retirement untouched. Fair and clean as these things went. David's signature was already there, a scrawl I once knew as well as my own. I traced it with my fingertip, wondering when exactly it had changed. It used to loop more at the D, I thought. When did it become so angular? I mailed the papers the next morning on my way to work. The postal clerk stamped the envelope without a second glance, unaware he was witnessing the official end of 7 years. I walked to the library feeling strangely weightless, as if I'd shed some invisible burden along with my married name. Dr. Rosenberg suggested new routines to match my new space. "Create patterns that belong only to you," she advised. "Reclaim your time." I took her words to heart, establishing small rituals. Coffee on the fire escape each morning, watching Somerville wake up. Yoga in the evenings, learning to occupy my body again after months of feeling disconnected from it. Weekend explorations of neighborhoods I'd never had reason to visit before. I was mapping a new geography of existence, one that didn't include David or the life we'd built. The cookbook I'd accidentally purchased became an unexpected companion in this journey. I'd never been much of a cook during my marriage. David had taken charge of our kitchen, claiming my efforts were enthusiastic but chaotic. Now I found myself following recipes with the same careful attention I gave to rare manuscripts at work. There was comfort in the precision, the measured ingredients, the predictable outcomes. "You made all this?" Emma asked one Sunday when I invited her family for dinner. The table was laden with roast chicken, root vegetables, and a chocolate cake that had turned out surprisingly well. "I did," I confirmed, feeling a spark of pride as Lily and her brother Jake dove into the food with enthusiasm. "Turns out I'm not as hopeless in the kitchen as we all thought." "You were never hopeless," Emma said quietly. "You just let yourself believe you were." Her words stayed with me long after they'd gone, echoing as I washed dishes and restored order to my small kitchen. How many other capabilities had I surrendered during my marriage? What else might I discover about myself in this unwanted freedom? The first holiday season post-separation loomed like a mountain on the horizon. Thanksgiving at Emma's was easy enough, surrounded by family, distracted by nieces and nephews. But Christmas threatened a particular kind of melancholy. David and I had traditions, inside jokes, ornaments collected over years. "You could come to us," Emma offered, "or we could all go to Mom and Dad's in Connecticut." "I think I need to figure out what my own Christmas looks like now," I told her. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. What emerged was quieter than I expected. I bought a small tree that fit in my apartment window, decorated it with lights and a few select ornaments from my share of our collection. I volunteered at a community dinner on Christmas Eve, serving turkey to strangers who became less strange as the evening progressed. On Christmas morning, I walked through the snow-covered streets to a coffee shop, where other solitary souls had gathered, all of us alone together. It wasn't the Christmas I would have chosen a year ago, but it held its own kind of peace. By New Year's Eve, when Emma insisted I join their party, I felt ready to step back into celebration. To new beginnings. Mark toasted at midnight, raising his glass toward me with knowing eyes. To foundations, I amended, thinking of all the invisible work of the past months, the therapy sessions, the quiet evenings alone, the slow rebuilding of myself. "You can't see them," but they determine what you can build. Later, standing on their porch watching fireworks bloom across the Cambridge skyline, I felt a text vibrate in my pocket. David, Happy New Year, Caroline. I hope you're well. I stared at the message for a long moment, thumb hovering over the keyboard. 6 months ago, these simple words would have undone me. Now they were just words from someone I used to know. Happy New Year, I typed back. Nothing more, nothing less. Just acknowledgement without attachment. Returning my phone to my pocket, I looked up at the exploding colors painting the night sky. Beginnings didn't have to be dramatic, I realized. Sometimes they were as quiet as signing papers, as simple as cooking dinner for yourself, as ordinary as answering a text without your heart breaking. Sometimes they happened so gradually you only recognized them in retrospect, when you suddenly realized you'd been building something new all along.